The series begins with Jongso, a woman from North Korea, happily dancing to music by BTS, a famous South Korean boy band. Even though she's from North Korea, Jongso has been enjoying K-pop and watching South Korean TV shows since she was young. She's a skilled shooter working as a soldier in the North Korean army, but things change when North and South Korea decide to work together to improve their economies. This means they'll merge their money systems and allow people from both countries to work and start businesses anywhere. Jongso sees this as a chance for a better life with a stronger economy, so she decides to leave the military and move to South Korea to start fresh. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned for Jongso in South Korea. Her immigration agent fooled her with a fake house and job, so she had to start over from scratch and do various jobs just to get by. Every day, she worked multiple jobs to pay her bills and expenses. During the day, she waited tables at a restaurant, and at night, she worked as an entertainer at a nightclub. She kept pondering over her decisions and felt unhappy with the life she was living. Furthermore, since Jongso entered the nightlife, she often witnessed thugs and gangsters behaving violently and harassing girls. She saw girls being mistreated by these gangsters in nightclubs repeatedly until she couldn't bear it anymore. One night, witnessing a young girl being badly hurt by gangsters, she decided to fight back. She confronted the gangsters one by one, even managing to grab their guns and shoot them. After rescuing the girl, she left the nightlife scene and turned to small crimes to survive. For the past year, Jongso had been living that way, and her robberies had been successful. However, one night, she saw news on TV about a theft she had committed. This made her panic because now she had to keep running and hide from the police. Jongso felt overwhelmed because she had no home to return to and didn't know what to do next. Feeling hopeless, she even considered ending her own life with a gun. But then a mysterious man named Professor Kim approached her and offered her a chance to join him. Professor Kim explained that he and his team were planning to steal a huge amount of money from the Korean money printing bank, specifically 4 trillion won. When Jongso heard about the amount, she immediately agreed to join the plan. Along with Jongso, Professor Kim recruited several other skilled robbers for the job. He instructed them to use fake names to keep their identities secret. One member, Rio, would be responsible for hacking. Denver, a former fighter, would handle physical tasks. Moscow, Denver's father, would arrange escape routes. Nairobi would manage disguises and infiltration. Helsinki and Oslo, tough individuals from a criminal group, were also brought on board. Berlin, a clever strategist, would organize the plan. Lastly, Jongso, going by the name Tokyo, would be the final member of the team. Once the fake names were chosen, Professor Kim quickly explained the plan for the robbery. He emphasized that it would be the biggest in Korea's history, targeting the Korean money printing bank known as the ZEB Bank. After 5 months of careful research and preparation, Professor Kim and his team began executing their plan. The scene shifted to the ZEB Bank building, where Deputy Director Young Min arrived at his office to start his day. He had left his smartwatch in the drawer before watching adult videos. Young Min's secretary, Yoo Mi-soon, who was also his mistress, disclosed to him that she was pregnant with his child, interrupting his plans for intimacy in the office. Meanwhile, Berlin and his team headed to the ZEB building in a school bus loaded with equipment and weapons. Nairobi and Tokyo, who were already at the scene, provided updates on the situation. It was an opportune day for the robbery as the bank was bustling with visitors, including a group of high school students on a tour. This meant the police wouldn't rush in or endanger the hostages when the theft occurred. After ensuring the situation was safe, Berlin and his team initiated their first plan, hijacking a money transfer truck en route to the ZEB Bank. Employing a carefully planned strategy, they stopped the truck with a barrier and disrupted the bank staff's communications. By firing a few shots, they coerced the police and bank officials out of the vehicle, granting Berlin and the others control. Once the security guards were removed, they instructed them to surrender their uniforms and IDs for disguises. This allowed Berlin's team to enter the bank without any obstacles. Inside the bank, Berlin and his crew promptly took the bank director and other officials hostage. Meanwhile, Tokyo and Nairobi began gathering hostages through the main entrance after incapacitating the security guards. Each group of robbers captured visitors and employees from different sections, gathering them in one area. Tokyo discovered a female student named Ann Kim hiding in the restroom. At the same time, Rio hacked into the bank's security system, blocking off all exits to prevent any hostages from escaping. After rounding up all the hostages, Berlin and his team swiftly blindfolded them and took away their cell phones. Meanwhile, Rio, Denver, and Moscow began drilling into the bank vault to reach the money inside. With Moscow's skills, they deactivated the safe's alarm system and unlocked its door. When they saw the amount of money inside, they celebrated their successful robbery. Once the initial phase was finished, Berlin, leading the operation, contacted Professor Kim to inform him of their progress. While Berlin's team executed the robbery, Professor Kim guided them from a distant location. Following this, Berlin triggered a false security alarm to draw the police to the scene. Tokyo and the others stood ready at the entrance, firing warning shots to deter the police without hurting them. However, when the police unexpectedly arrived, they started shooting at the robbers, injuring Rio. Reacting quickly, Tokyo used smoke bombs to provide cover and safely bring Rio back into the building. After securing the building and notifying the police, Nairobi and the others instructed the hostages to wear similar outfits to blend in. Berlin stressed to the hostages the importance of staying calm and not resisting to prevent anyone from getting hurt. News of the robbery spread through various media channels, prompting both North Korean and South Korean authorities to plan a response. A male officer named Yoon Chung-soo was chosen to lead the capture operation, while a female chief negotiator named Soon Woo-jin was assigned to handle negotiations. Woo-jin would collaborate with North Korean police chief Cha Moo-yuk on this mission. Upon hearing about the South Korean negotiators' involvement, Moo-yuk sarcastically rejected the decision, believing negotiation was unnecessary for a robbery case. However, Woo-jin and Chung-soo agreed to prioritize negotiation as the first step, considering the safety of over 50 hostages at risk. While Woo-jin was talking to Professor Kim, the police tried to trace his voice to find out who he was. However, Professor Kim had used voice modulation technology, so they couldn't trace him. Even though Woo-jin begged for the hostages to be released, Professor Kim refused and falsely claimed there were only 4 robbers. As the night went on, Woo-jin took a break with her colleague Dong-kul to discuss their plan for dealing with the ZEB bank robbery. Suddenly, they were surprised by a large group of police officers sneaking into the bank for an ambush. Seeing this, Woo-jin went to Chung-soo, expressing worry about the dangerous situation. Chung-soo explained that Moo-yuk planned the ambush thinking there were only 4 robbers involved. However, Woo-jin cautioned him that it might be a trap set by the robbers. Despite her warning, Chung-soo insisted on following Moo-yuk's plan and encouraged Woo-jin to leave. While Chung-soo and his team were occupied with planning the ambush, Woo-jin decided to have dinner with her boyfriend, Soon-ho. Unbeknownst to her, Soon-ho was actually the mastermind behind the robbery operation she was investigating. Before their relationship, Soon-ho knew of Woo-jin's role as the chief negotiator for the South Korean police, aiming to use their relationship to gain insider information on the case. Meanwhile, Berlin and the other robbers were getting ready to confront the Special Forces unit sent by Moo-yuk. They carefully planned their defense strategy, anticipating where the Special Forces might enter to block their advance. Additionally, they instructed Director Young-min and Ann Kim to do a live broadcast, informing the police that both hostages and robbers were dressed alike, and urging the police to avoid actions that could put the hostages in danger. When Chung-soo found out that Ann Kim, the daughter of the U.S. ambassador, was among the hostages, he immediately ordered the Special Forces to withdraw. As a result, the police called off their ambush, and the robbers celebrated their successful prevention of police intervention. Meanwhile, while enjoying tea with Woo-jin, Professor Kim mentioned that the police team would contact her soon. Soon after, he told her that Chung-soo had indeed reached out to her, asking her to return to the operation. After leaving the professor's house, Woo-jin immediately got in touch with Berlin to proceed with their second plan, counterfeiting money. Before the robbery, Professor Kim had speculated that 4 trillion won wouldn't be kept in one place, so they decided to use the bank's money printing machine to produce the money directly. This clever plan would make their heist one of the most revolutionary crimes in history. As the counterfeit operation continued, Berlin instructed his team to split the hostages into different groups. Some were responsible for preparing food, while others were assigned to help with drilling for their escape. The following day, the media persisted in questioning the police about their actions. There were rumors about a possible police ambush the previous night, which could have put the hostages in danger, but the police continued to deny these rumors. Wu Jin, back on duty, dismissed the rumors, stressing the importance of prioritizing the safety of the hostages. She then returned to the police command tent and encouraged Mu Yok to cooperate for effective negotiations. Recognizing the significance of Wu Jin's negotiation skills, Mu Yok agreed to work with her. Later that day, when Wu Jin phoned the professor, he guided the conversation towards personal topics. From this exchange, Wu Jin inferred that the robbers might be losing confidence and would soon need to go out for more supplies. However, Professor Kim intentionally engaged in small talk to delay until the money printing process was finished. Meanwhile, Moscow instructed Director Young Min and a few other hostages to dig a tunnel for an escape route. An argument erupted between Denver and Young Min because of Young Min's offensive comments. Berlin quickly intervened, separating Denver and calming him down to ensure the robbery proceeded smoothly. While Moscow dealt with Denver, Young Min gathered the remaining hostages to plan a signal to alert the police. Taking advantage of an opportunity, Young Min grabbed a shovel and injured one of the hostages to divert Moscow and Denver's attention, enabling him to retrieve his smartwatch from his office. However, Tokyo, who was patrolling the area, observed Young Min's actions and reported them to Berlin. In response, Berlin gathered the hostages and divided them into 2 groups, North Korean and South Korean. When Ann Kim, the ambassador's daughter, pointed out that she wasn't assigned to either group, Berlin instructed Ryoto confine her to another room. He then warned the hostages that any mistake by a member of one group would lead to consequences for the other group. Therefore, he stressed the importance of vigilance among the hostages to prevent any wrongdoing. Upon hearing the announcement, Tokyo immediately confronted Berlin, expressing concern about dividing the hostages, which Professor Kim had prohibited. Tokyo feared this could provoke a riot among the hostages and endanger the success of the robbery. However, Berlin reassured them, emphasizing the necessity of instilling fear among the hostages to prevent reckless actions. Later that afternoon, as the hostages gathered to eat together, Young Min confided in Mi-soon, revealing the smartwatch hidden in his office drawer. He urged Mi-soon to find a way to retrieve it and seek help from the police. Despite the risks, Mi-soon hesitated, but Young Min persisted, promising to marry her once they were free. Denver, noticing their suspicious conversation, intervened and inquired about the situation. Young Min explained that Mi-soon needed rest, leading Denver to escort her to Anne's room for a nap. In Anne's room, Mi-soon sought her help to distract the robbers guarding the area while she retrieved the smartwatch. Anne agreed and attempted to lure Rio away by suggesting they go to the restroom together. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Mi-soon sneaked into the director's office to search for the smartwatch in Young Min's drawer. Meanwhile, Anne tried to prolong Rio's absence by engaging in intimate moments before they returned to the confinement room. After finding the smartwatch, Mi-soon quickly signaled the police to reveal her location. However, her efforts were interrupted when Denver unexpectedly entered the room, prompting Mi-soon to deactivate the smartwatch and hide it. When Denver became suspicious, Mi-soon claimed she was searching for food because she was hungry. Kindly, Denver offered her snacks and bread, easing his suspicions. Meanwhile, Anne's attempt to trick Rio failed, resulting in her arrest and return to the isolation room. The police traced the short signal from Mi-soon and determined it came from one of the hostages. Although the signal was brief, Wu Jin contacted Professor Kim to ensure the hostages' safety. Relieved that the robbers were unaware of the signal, Wu Jin planned their next move. Dongkul, the head of hacking, suggested sending a link through the smartwatch to track its location and capture video footage. After hearing Mi-soon's explanation, Denver confronted Young Min, expressing his frustration for not being responsible for Mi-soon's pregnancy. Mi-soon intervened to defuse the tension and discreetly placed a smartwatch in Young Min's pocket. Meanwhile, Professor Kim became suspicious due to the absence of police contact for negotiations. He contacted Ryodo to get an update on the situation inside the building. Despite Ryo's assurance of safety, Professor Kim sensed something was wrong and invited Woojin to dinner to discuss further. As Young Min tried to excuse himself to activate the smartwatch in the bathroom, Denver remained cautious and insisted on keeping the bathroom door open, suspecting Young Min's intentions. In the meantime, Woojin met with Sunho, also known as Professor Kim, to have sandwiches and chat. Professor Kim tried to gather information about the robbery case from Woojin, but his attempts were unsuccessful. At one point, Woojin received a call from the police team, prompting Professor Kim to pretend to leave to listen in on her conversation. Dong Chul informed Woojin that they had successfully sent a link and tapped into the sound from Young Min's smartwatch. However, when Woojin noticed Professor Kim eavesdropping on her call, she abruptly ended the conversation and questioned his motives. Professor Kim claimed he was just concerned about Woojin's safety and worried that she might be involved with someone else. After Woojin departed, Professor Kim immediately got in touch with Berlin and informed him about the smartwatch belonging to one of the hostages. In response, Berlin instructed the team to gather all the hostages and conduct individual searches. This made Young Min nervous, so he asked Mi-soon to distract the guards while he activated his smartwatch. Consequently, the police intercepted conversations and monitored events inside the building through the smartwatch. Young Min discreetly passed the smartwatch to Mi-soon, who helped him avoid detection as he scanned each hostage with a metal detector. When it was Mi-soon's turn, Young Min took extra care to prevent detecting the watch. Unfortunately, Berlin caught onto this plan, prompting him to scan Mi-soon again. Initially, Mi-soon almost avoided detection by Berlin, but to their surprise, the smartwatch slipped out from her clothes, leading Berlin to order his team to punish her. Berlin promptly destroyed the watch, cutting off the police surveillance signal. However, they still managed to capture video footage of the events inside the building. Upon receiving the report about the watch, Professor Kim quickly contacted Woojin, warning that he wouldn't tolerate a repeat of such incidents. On the other hand, feeling annoyed, Berlin immediately ordered Denver to kill Mi-soon. However, Denver refused, disclosing that Mi-soon was pregnant. Despite Denver's plea, Berlin insisted on Mi-soon's execution, leaving Denver with no option but to obey. Taking Mi-soon to a room, Denver questioned her about her pregnancy. Fueled by anger over Mi-soon's lies and manipulation of his feelings, Denver fatally shot her. The gunshot startled Tokyo and the hostages, who were shocked by Mi-soon's sudden death. Berlin then approached Young Min, acknowledging him as the mastermind behind the events. However, Berlin chose not to punish him, considering Mi-soon's death as sufficient punishment to instill fear among the hostages. Upon learning this, the other hostages started blaming Young Min for Mi-soon's tragic fate. Berlin went into the room where Denver was supposed to have killed Mi-soon to confirm her death. Tokyo, disagreeing with Berlin's actions, considered informing Professor Kim about Berlin's crime. However, Berlin intervened, urging Tokyo not to disrupt their robbery plan, which he believed needed to proceed smoothly. When Professor Kim contacted Berlin, he decided to hide Mi-soon's death, stating he had only given a warning to the hostages. He then instructed Ryo to trace the data on the found smartwatch to see what information the police had obtained. Frustrated by Berlin's actions, Tokyo approached Denver to examine Mi-soon's body. To Tokyo's surprise, she discovered that Mi-soon was pretending to be dead. Denver had deliberately shot her in the leg to trick Berlin into believing she was dead. Seeing Mi-soon's serious injury, Tokyo tended to her wounds. Worried about Berlin finding out the truth, Denver asked Tokyo for help in planning to report the incident to Professor Kim and remove Berlin from his leadership position. However, before dealing with Berlin, they needed to get rid of Helsinki and Oslo, as Tokyo thought they would support Berlin. On the other hand, the police team examined a short video from Young Min's smartwatch. In the footage, they recognized one of the robbers, Rio, prompting them to quickly uncover his true identity. Upon further investigation, they found out that Rio is actually a 22-year-old former medical student named Han Joseph. Realizing Rio's skills as a proficient hacker, Wu Jin concluded that the robbery team had carefully planned their operation. This suggested that the robbers had probably conducted surveillance on the ZEB bank building beforehand. As a result, Wu Jin instructed Dong Kuhl to review the CCTV footage before the robbery. Meanwhile, Moscow focused on digging an escape route for the robbery team. It turned out that the escape route initially dug by the hostages was simply a diversion planned by the robbers to distract the police during their escape. After Mi-soon was shot, tensions rose among the hostages, leading Moscow, who was unaware of the incident, to become suspicious. Berlin asked Denver to explain the situation to Moscow, but Denver avoided the conversation to avoid being involved in murder. When Tokyo abruptly left, Denver told Oslo to follow her. However, Tokyo noticed Oslo tailing her, and with Denver's help, took the chance to confront and overpower him. Meanwhile, despite her serious injuries, Mi-soon managed to sneak into a room and leave a message for Young Min, indicating that she was still alive. While on patrol, Helsinki heard noises from the room and went to check. Fortunately, Tokyo intervened just in time, preventing Helsinki from finding Mi-soon and thus saving her. After Rio finished hacking into the data on Young Min's smartwatch, he assured the team that there was only a short video clip, so there was nothing to be concerned about. However, Berlin remained worried, fearing that one of the robbers might be recognizable in the video. Unfortunately, Berlin's fears came true when the police team identified Rio and Nairobi from the CCTV footage taken the day before the robbery. Amid Berlin's worries, Tokyo surprised everyone by pointing a gun at Berlin, demanding that he report the Mi-soon incident to Professor Kim. Despite Berlin's claim that his actions were justified to prevent further mistakes by the hostages, Tokyo insisted on putting it to a vote among the members. Shortly after, Nairobi, returning from the money printing room, was confused by the situation. Tokyo informed her that Berlin had broken Professor Kim's rules by killing a hostage and causing disagreement among the hostages. When Professor Kim unexpectedly contacted them, Tokyo pressured Berlin to confess his actions to Professor Kim. Berlin had to admit his actions, confessing that he had killed a hostage because their behavior had put the robbery at risk. Professor Kim, upon hearing Berlin's confession, was visibly surprised, as he had repeatedly emphasized that no one should be harmed. Disheartened, Professor Kim had to tell the team that the police had identified Rio and Nairobi. This news caused panic among the robbers, especially Rio, who was afraid of his family finding out about his involvement. Berlin emphasized to the team that such actions were a response to the hostages seeing them as weak, stressing the need to show dominance. Nairobi agreed with Berlin's viewpoint, while Rio became increasingly anxious, leading to a confrontation with Denver. This argument unintentionally revealed Denver's role in the death, leaving Moscow, his father, feeling deeply regretful. Despite Denver's explanations, Moscow, disappointed, scolded him. Unexpectedly, Moscow silently unlocked the main door of the bank building, planning to turn himself in to the police. Seeing this, Wu Jin instructed the special forces to approach to evaluate the situation. Denver, worried about his father's safety, hurried after Moscow to stop him from surrendering. Moscow intended to confess to the murder alone to spare Denver from punishment, but Denver insisted he hadn't committed any murder during the robbery. Observing this, Berlin devised a plan to protect Moscow and Denver. He ordered Young Min and several hostages, along with Tokyo, to leave the building to prevent the police from shooting. Confusion arose as hostages emerged, leaving Wu Jin and the police unsure of who the real robbers were. Tokyo disguised Moscow with a mask and informed him that Mi-soon was alive, which angered Rio and led to an argument with Denver. Seeing the altercation, Young Min grabbed Rio's gun and pointed it at Tokyo. Mistakenly thinking there was resistance, the police shot at Young Min. Upon realizing they had shot Young Min, the director of the money printing bank, Wu Jin, and the police team found themselves in a difficult situation. Tokyo directed the others to bring Young Min inside the building and asked Ryo to assist in treating him, knowing Ryo's medical background. Meanwhile, Woo Jin contacted Professor Kim, urging him to hand over Young Min to the police for urgent medical care. However, Professor Kim refused, so Woo Jin requested permission for medical personnel to enter and operate on Young Min. After receiving approval from Professor Kim, Moo-yuk devised a plan for him to enter disguised as part of the medical team. Professor Kim informed Berlin about this, although Berlin was initially unsure due to the risks involved. Amidst the chaos, Denver took Moscow to the room where Mi-soon was held to prove she was alive. Seeing Mi-soon's condition, Moscow and Denver felt regretful, but were unable to act while Berlin remained in charge. Soon after, Ryo and Tokyo arrived to assess Mi-soon's gunshot wound. Tokyo suggested Ryo perform surgery on Mi-soon when the medical team arrived, but Ryo declined, fearing Berlin's reaction to the incident. When Mi-soon woke up, she asked about the medical team's arrival, leading Denver to disclose Young Min's shooting. Upon learning this, Mi-soon gave Denver a note to pass on to Young Min. At the same time, Woo Jin and the police team came up with a plan to use Young Min's surgery as a diversion. They aimed to allow the special forces to enter the building through the ventilation system unnoticed. Woo Jin directed the medical team to prolong the surgery to give the special forces more time to enter safely. Their main objective was to ensure the hostages' safety before launching an attack on the robbers. Before entering the building with the medical team, Moo-yuk wore surveillance goggles to monitor the robbers' movements. As Moo-yuk and the medical team entered, Tokyo told the hostages to wear masks and welcome them. The robbers noticed Moo-yuk's goggles but didn't pay much attention, thinking they were regular glasses. Instead, they focused on searching for Woo Jin. Meanwhile, the special forces silently entered the building through the ventilation shaft, disguised in outfits similar to the robbers to avoid being spotted. During Young Min's surgery, Berlin carefully watched Moo-yuk's actions and became suspicious. Berlin insisted that Moo-yuk take over the surgery, which led Moo-yuk to reveal his true identity as a policeman, claiming it was part of standard security procedures. This admission made Professor Kim doubt Moo-yuk, so he instructed Ryo to keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, the police special forces began their secret entry through the cafeteria vents. Denver discreetly gathered medical supplies, signaling to Berlin and the other robbers. Professor Kim eventually noticed the surveillance camera in Moo-yuk's glasses, suspecting that the police were infiltrating elsewhere. He alerted the team in the field and activated his backup plan. As Moo-yuk and the medical team prepared to leave, they noticed that the hostages' masks had changed, causing panic. Seeing this, Woo Jin ordered the special forces to stop their infiltration. While Tokyo, Nairobi, and Oslo methodically checked each room to ensure the police special forces had left, Ryo delivered the message that Professor Kim's covert operation had succeeded. Professor Kim had instructed Ryo to intercept Moo-yuk's cell phone during the security checkpoint at the main door. Unaware of the interception, Moo-yuk returned to the police tent, unaware of the robbers' surveillance. Once the medical team had left, Berlin instructed his team to escort the hostages back to the holding room. Observing Ryo's suspicious behavior, Berlin grew cautious and suspected Ryo of hiding something. Meanwhile, Denver and Moscow prepared Mi-soon for surgery by administering anesthesia. However, Tokyo discovered that Berlin had detained Ryo for he could proceed with the operation and interrogated him about their secret plans. On the other hand, Mi-soon asked about Young Min's condition, and it replied to her earlier message, leading Denver, who had feelings for Mi-soon, to make up a response, saying that Young Min had received the letter. Shortly after, Berlin and Helsinki entered the room with harmful intentions towards Mi-soon, prompting Denver to step in and shield her. Suddenly, Mi-soon had a seizure because of her worsening gunshot wound. Seeing the situation, Tokyo urgently instructed Ryo to attend to Mi-soon and perform surgery to save her life. Although Ryo initially hesitated due to his fear of blood, he eventually decided to go ahead with the surgery. After the successful surgery on Mi-soon, Tokyo discovered Ryo in the bathroom, visibly upset and vomiting, and tried to comfort him. Their conversation revealed that Rio had been afraid of blood since he was a child, but felt pressured to become a doctor because his parents were in that profession. This upbringing caused Rio to rebel against his parents and leave home to pursue his own interests. Meanwhile, Mi-soon, who had woken up, found Denver by her side, offering his support. Feeling thankful for Denver's care, Mi-soon started to develop feelings for him. Upon hearing that Mi-soon was alive, Professor Kim felt relieved and instructed Tokyo to take over the robbery operation. He also ordered them to keep Berlin confined to a room because he had broken important rules. At the same time, the news outlets began discussing the police shooting incident and blamed Woo Jin, the leader of the operation, for not ensuring the safety of the hostages. Tired from the day's events, Woo Jin went home to take care of her mother and daughter by herself. Being a single parent after her husband left her, Woo Jin was deeply affected by the media reports. Professor Kim, knowing how upset Woo Jin was, tried to comfort her by suggesting they sleep together for support. The following day, Woo Jin went to the district court for a hearing about the custody of her daughter, Mi-na. Her ex-husband, Sung-mund, is a public figure and is running for the South Korean presidency. Meanwhile, Moo-yuk tried to contact a member of the special forces who was still in the bank. He found out that Park Chul-woo had managed to get into the building and pretend to be one of the hostages. Later that night, the South Korean leader visited Moo-yuk to ask about how the robbery investigation was going, as there were demands for quick action. Moo-yuk asked for more time, pointing out that one of the special forces members had successfully gotten inside. When the Prime Minister heard this, he guessed that the robbers might have involved Woo Jin in their plans. The Prime Minister said that the robbers had been looking into the police officers connected to the case, suggesting that Woo Jin's involvement might be part of their scheme. He emphasized the need to resolve the situation before an important government meeting, as the robbery posed a big threat to the country's money situation. The night after, when the guards were sleeping, Park Chul-woo secretly called the police station. Moo-yuk told Chul-woo to find out about the leader of the robbers, who was called Professor Kim. Little did they know, Professor Kim wasn't at the place, but was keeping an eye on things from afar. The next day, Nairobi told the hostages that Berlin had taken a break and told them the happy news that Mi-soon was safe. The hostages felt relieved and happily welcomed her back. Nairobi seemed calmer than Berlin and let the sick hostages take a rest. After spending time with Professor Kim, Woo Jin came back to the police station feeling more determined, encouraging everyone to stay focused on their mission. She chatted casually with Professor Kim, asking simple questions like what he had for breakfast. Without realizing, Professor Kim mentioned sandwiches, which would later be important for Woo Jin. She offered support and food to the robbers without any conditions. When Mi-soon returned, Young Min, who had recovered, tried to talk to her, but she didn't seem interested because she had feelings for someone else. Later, Denver asked Mi-soon to go to another room to change her bandage. Although they seemed to like each other, they were hesitant to show their feelings. On the other hand, Park Chul-woo's disguise almost got discovered by Young Min, but An Kim, recognizing him as a policeman, quickly diverted Young Min's attention. Park Chul-woo, knowing An Kim was the daughter of the US ambassador, asked about a robber known as a professor. An Kim said she hadn't heard of such a robber, but knew who the hostage was and who could help them. Meanwhile, Woo Jin checked the list of food planned for delivery to the building. Noticing that sandwiches were missing, she realized that Professor Kim wasn't in the bank building. Woo Jin then told Moo-yuk and the other officers, thinking that Professor Kim might be giving orders to the robbers from somewhere else. Professor Kim, overhearing their talk, got more worried. He panicked when Woo Jin told Dong-kul to track the car seen on the bank's CCTV. Professor Kim warned Rio that the police were focusing on chasing him, putting him in danger. Meanwhile, Park Chul-woo and An Kim went to talk to Mi-soon about the robbery's leader. Young Min, seeing Park Chul-woo taking Mi-soon away, immediately assumed the worst, thinking Park Chul-woo might be bothering her. Hurrying to Mi-soon's room, Young Min tried to open the door forcefully, making noise that alerted Helsinki. Luckily, Oslo stepped in just as Helsinki approached, distracting him. With everyone gathered, Professor Kim asked Helsinki about the car used in the robbery. Helsinki admitted he had paid Hae-jong Jae to get rid of the car. After hearing this, Professor Kim decided to go to the car dump to make sure the car wasn't found by the police, as it had their DNA. At the same time, Dong Chul found the car's location and gave the coordinates to Woo-jin. Meanwhile, Chol-woo, Young-min, Mi-soon, and An came up with a plan to uncover the robbery's leader. They suggested that Mi-soon seduce Denver, who had feelings for her, leading him into a room where they could catch him. Their goal was to get information from Denver through questioning to find out who was behind the robbery. At first unsure, Mi-soon expresses her concerns, mentioning how Denver had saved her life before. But Young-min convinces her to go along with the plan. When Mi-soon sends a message to Denver to meet her in the storage room, he eagerly goes there. However, when he arrives, Young-min and Park Chul-woo overpower him and tie him to a chair. After some intense questioning, Young-min starts suspecting Tokyo as the professor, thinking she's the main person behind the robbery. On the other hand, Professor Kim rushes to the car dump with Woo-jin, who is also heading there. When they arrive, Professor Kim faces a problem trying to access the data of the dumped cars, because the owners of the site unexpectedly confront him. Luckily, Professor Kim avoids them and goes straight to the car dump area after hearing police sirens approaching. Meanwhile, Park Chul-woo manually set off the fire alarm in the bank building to make a distraction for the robbers. This made Tokyo and the other robbers rush to Ryo's room to see what was happening. At the same time, Professor Kim found the right car and quickly got rid of all the fingerprints on it. On a different note, Tokyo, seeing the chaos in the building, told Nairobi to stop printing money and gather the cash they had collected. Meanwhile, Ryo was assigned to keep an eye on Berlin's condition in case something went wrong. Tokyo and Oslo then went to the room where the hostages were kept to check on them, while Young-min kept attacking Denver. Luckily, Mi-soon stepped in just in time and begged Young-min to stop. But instead of listening, Young-min grabbed an iron hammer intending to harm them both. Thankfully, Mi-soon and Denver were able to overpower Young-min after he was caught off guard by Mi-soon's warning. At the same time, Woo-jin and her team found the car they were looking for and found out that Professor Kim was still in it. Meanwhile, Ryo, who was supposed to check on Berlin, was surprised when Berlin suddenly attacked him, pretending to be in trouble. Park Chul-woo, who knew where Tokyo was, followed her into a room, and soon after, gunshots were heard from inside the bank building. Moo-yuk, hearing the shots, got worried and tried to reach Park Chul-woo, but got no answer. The story shifts back to Professor Kim, who realizes he's surrounded and decides to escape in his car. Woo-jin, informed of his attempt to flee, starts a tense chase, leading to a fast pursuit between Professor Kim and the police team. While being chased, Professor Kim remembers his past life as a college professor, where he had a comfortable life. He was well known as one of the smartest people in economics, and had worked with a government official named O.J. Yoon, who led the Bursama Economic Zone policy. After a long chase, Woo-jin and her team finally trap Professor Kim. However, he reveals a clever plan: sinking the car into the river and escaping underwater. Meanwhile, the robbers mistake the gunshots for an attempt on Tokyo's life by Park Chul-woo, but it's revealed that Berlin had actually subdued Park Chul-woo. On another note, rumors spread among the police team about the Special Forces member who died during the infiltration mission. When Woo-jin learns of Park Chul-woo's death, she criticizes Moo-yuk for indirectly causing the squad member's demise. She's surprised that the robbers didn't disclose Park Chul-woo's death to the public, unlike when director Young-min was shot. This raises suspicions that the robbery might have hidden motives, such as gaining public sympathy or influencing public opinion. Seeing the robbers' concern for public perception as a weakness, Woo-jin plans to exploit it to counter them. After getting rid of the car evidence, the professor quickly returns to headquarters and assures the robbery team that the car issue has been dealt with. Reflecting on recent events, Tokyo feels regretful and decides to hand leadership back to Berlin. She starts realizing the importance of keeping the hostages afraid to prevent them from acting recklessly. Soon after, Woo Jin contacts Professor Kim, expressing concern about the situation inside the building after hearing about the gunshots. Professor Kim assures her that they don't intend to harm the hostages and explains that the gunshots were just a way to ease tension. Woo Jin then encouraged the professor to keep the families informed about the hostages' well-being, as they were worried. Though hesitant at first, Professor Kim agreed when Woo Jin stressed the importance of being transparent to calm public anger. He agreed to let Woo Jin share updates about the hostages with the public. The next day, Berlin and Tokyo gathered the hostages and warned them not to cause any trouble when the police officers came later. Berlin made it clear that he wouldn't tolerate any disruptions and threatened consequences for disobedience. Just before the news, Young Min secretly told Ann Kim to write a message about a deceased police officer on a piece of money and give it to Woo Jin later. On the same day, the police brought together all the families of the hostages, especially the parents of the students still inside the building. Without their knowledge, Professor Kim also quietly attended the meeting to see the situation firsthand. When Woo Jin entered through the main door, Berlin confidently greeted her without wearing a mask, surprising everyone. Berlin then invited Woo Jin to meet each hostage individually to maintain control. After checking on several hostages, including Young Min, the bank director, Woo Jin met Anne, who pretended to cry to slip a message to her. Unfortunately, Tokyo and Berlin found out about this and quickly took Anne to another room. After this incident, Woo Jin suggested releasing all the hostages at once to save time. She then carefully checked each hostage, comparing them with the list they had. But after examining all the hostages, Woo Jin suddenly asked about Park Chul-woo's location, falsely claiming he was one of the bank employees. It turned out that Woo Jin had secretly added Park Chul-woo's name to the hostage list to make it seem like the robbers had killed one of them. Berlin couldn't argue against this, and Woo Jin felt more confident as it could help in negotiations to release some hostages. This revelation caused uproar among the parents, who demanded the immediate release of their children. Unexpectedly, Denver brought Park Chul-woo before everyone, proving all of Woo Jin's accusations to be wrong. It turned out that Berlin and the other robbers had been hiding the fact that Park Chul-woo was still alive. When Berlin shot Park, he just passed out because he was wearing a bulletproof vest. In addition to revealing the truth about Berlin's shooting, the robbers hacked into the television station to show the chaos caused by Park Chul-woo. Berlin later said that Park Chul-woo had put the hostages in danger by acting on his own. He argued that if the police had gone ahead with the ambush, they would have cared more about their own plans than the safety of the hostages, using them as shields. After this news was broadcast, the families of the hostages and the Korean public blamed the police for risking lives. Feeling defeated, Woo Jin left the building empty-handed because the robbers had outsmarted her every time. This event made people feel sorry for the robbers and damaged the police's reputation. Denver and the other robbers praised Berlin's clever plan, celebrating their success when they realized Moscow had dug an escape route and the money printing was almost done. While everyone seemed happy, Denver felt a bit sad as he got ready to say goodbye to Mi-soon. He decided to help Mi-soon one last time by changing the bandage on her leg. At the same time, Moo-yuk went to see Woo Jin to say goodbye because the government told him to stop working on the case. However, Moo-yuk said he was determined to keep helping Woo Jin find Professor Kim. Knowing about Woo Jin's boyfriend, Moo-yuk warned her to be careful around Soon-ho, suggesting he might be a spy. But Woo Jin defended Soon-ho, saying he was trustworthy and harmless. When Professor Kim heard this on Moo-yuk's phone, he felt touched but also guilty for lying to Woo Jin. That night, Professor Kim and Woo Jin went on a date, having dinner together and strengthening their relationship. During this time, Professor Kim realized he had feelings for Woo Jin and didn't want to leave her. After saying goodbye to Woo Jin, Professor Kim went home and found Moo-yuk waiting outside. The series ends with a tense moment as Professor Kim faces Moo-yuk, who seems to suspect him as the mastermind behind the money-printing bank robbery. So the moral of the story is, always check your surroundings before planning a dramatic escape. You never know when someone might be faking their own death just to catch.